Imagine knowing exactly how the movie of reality ends, but every single time you sneak a peek at the script, your heart loses 1,000 beats. That is the cosmic joke played on Paddra Nsu-Yeul. We are diving straight into the deep psychological meat of Final Fantasy XIII-2 here, bypassing the flashy time travel mechanics to dissect a character who is essentially a living, breathing paradox. Paddra Nsu-Yeul is caught in a relentless meat grinder of eternal recurrence, gifted with the Eyes of Etro, which is less a divine blessing and more a terminal neurological overload, because every time history shifts, she sees it, and every time she sees it, her lifespan gets aggressively shaved down. Talk about a brutal data cap on existence. She presents this mask of serene, stoic acceptance to the world, but underneath that calm veneer lies an agonizing internal friction, a profound vulnerability where she must constantly reconcile her individual identity with the crushing collective memory of all her past incarnations. It's a vicious coping mechanism, really, acting completely detached because caring too much about a life that ends in her teens would completely shatter her psyche. The gaps in her history are where the real trauma hides. Think about the silent intervals between her reincarnations. Yes, she is always reborn the same, with a similar personality, the psychological residue that must stain her soul every time she resets. It is highly logical to speculate that Paddra Nsu-Yeul suffers from a unique brand of ancestral PTSD, a cellular haunting where she doesn't just remember her past lives, she actually feels the physical and emotional echoes of her previous deaths. She wakes as a child, already carrying the faint, phantom pain of a spear through your ribs from 3 centuries ago, which perfectly explains her eerie, unmoored behavior. She isn't just reacting to the present timeline, she is constantly calibrating her actions against a chaotic chorus of ghosts inside her own head. Paddra Nsu-Yeul functions as both the ultimate narrative anchor and a devastatingly effective emotional mirror. She might deceive the watcher as a passive damsel, her very feminine and delicate body language does help with the deception, indeed, yet, she is the literal catalyst driving the antagonist, Caius, into absolute, timeline-shattering insanity, while simultaneously reflecting the existential despair that haunts Noel. Caius, who is her putative father since her first incarnation, Caius himself coursed with immortality to be her guardian, is at the root and hero. He only wants Yeul to be Fred of her course, to see her live a fulfilling life, not to die always when 16 years old, a constant, unfair loop. But his methods are so extreme and an extreme dangerous not only for all humanity, but for all of the timelines, as Caius' goal is to erase all previous history, spread the chaos from the void beyond, and rebuild a world for Yeul. Yeul is a walking philosophical critique of deterministic systems, a tragic representation of how cosmic systems exploit the innocent to maintain their arbitrary equilibrium, showing us that foresight is a curse when paired with total physical helplessness. Her design is extremely good, a mixture of dignified and earthly. Those tribal beads clink against a pristine white top, creating a stark visual dissonance between ancient, grounded traditions and an ethereal, almost detached divinity. That bruised lavender gradient on her skirt subtly whispers of a youth constantly fading into the twilight of mortality, while the golden laurel ornaments in her hair act like a gilded cage, trapping her thoughts within a royal, inescapable destiny. Even the fragile wildflower that embellishes her forehead serves as a brilliant, silent punctuation mark to her existence, a fleeting, beautiful thing that wilts almost immediately, mirroring her own brief transit through the harsh world of Final Fantasy XIII-2. Her voice acting matches this perfectly, utilizing a soft, rhythmic cadence that feels almost hypnotic, as if she is speaking from a different spatial dimension entirely, while her haunting musical leitmotif emphasizes this isolation with melancholic chords that hang heavily in the air. And hint about how mature she is within, her own eyes highlighting the wisdom of a cursed, immortal woman within a young girl's body. Her interpersonal friction is where the mask truly slips, especially when you observe how she recalibrates her presence depending on who is watching. Around Caius, Paddra Nsu-Yeul shifts between a fragile ward needing protection and an ancient, almost maternal matriarch whispering prophesies, creating a deeply toxic, agonizingly codependent loop where she comforts the man who is destroying the universe to save her. She does not do it as a whim, she does it because she pities her own foster father, and she knows he is, deep down, suffering so much while hiding it with his Dark Knight persona. She feels she must humor him. Within Yeul, there is desire to delay the upcoming of chaos. Put her next to Sarah or Noel, though, and she becomes a haunting oracle, using an almost clinical, detached syntax because she knows intimacy is a luxury her ticking clock simply cannot afford. So, why did the wider gaming community, who relishes in feeling so much more nuanced, or outright superior, compared to the so-called norm years, somewhat overlooks this absolute powerhouse of a tragic figure during the initial life cycle of Final Fantasy XIII-2. Yeul was essentially failed by a marketing machine that focused entirely on flashy paradigm shifts and the admittedly magnificent, booming presence of Caius. Caius, whose own Final Fantasy is to selfishly sacrifice all for only one person, completely blind to any possible alternative solution, an excuse for Caius to humor his own need to feel useful for what he sees as a bigger cause. Paddra Nsu-Yeul was simply too quiet, too layered, and perhaps a bit too psychologically complex for a casual audience that was already struggling to untangle the game's labyrinthine timeline paradoxes, leading her to be unfairly dismissed as a mere plot device rather than recognized as the emotional linchpin of the entire narrative. A recommended read that explores Caius and Yeul is the prequel comic, doubling as a sequel comic too, titled A Father to the Seer, which brings to a much more satisfying conclusion Yeul's, Caius's, Sarah's, and Noel's tangled story.